It was a cold Thursday evening when Jake found himself standing in the dark hallway of an office building, mopping the floors of an almost empty corporate world. The sound of his mop scraping the floor echoed in the silence, a stark contrast to the bustling days he once knew. Every night he entered the building with a heart heavy with exhaustion and a mind burdened with unspoken dreams. He wasn't just mopping the floors. He was cleaning up a life filled with struggle, responsibility, and the hope that one day, everything would change. Jake had never imagined himself here, a single father, raising his 80-year-old son, Lucas, on his own. Life had dealt him a hard hand. His wife had left when Lucas was just a baby, and Jake had become both mother and father. Every day was a fight for survival, juggling between his day job and the late-night cleaning shift at a corporate office to make ends meet. But it wasn't just the long hours that wore him down. It was the constant reminder of his limitations. The dreams he had once had about being successful, about making something of himself, now seemed out of reach. The stack of bills on his kitchen counter, the empty fridge, and the never-ending task of making sure Lucas never felt abandoned, all weighed heavily on him. Every day felt like an endless loop, but Jake kept going, putting one foot in front of the other, because that was what being a father meant. Each day was the same as the last. Jake would wake up early to get Lucas ready for school, making sure he ate breakfast before rushing off to catch the school bus. He worked his regular 9-to-5 job in a small office, handling administrative tasks, typing up reports, and answering phones. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. After work, Jake would come home, heat up dinner, and spend time with Lucas before the young boy went to bed. Once Lucas was asleep, Jake would leave for his second job cleaning the offices in a high-rise building downtown. The cleaning job wasn't anything to brag about. In fact, it was the kind of job that most people wouldn't even consider. The building was mostly empty at night, except for a few workers who stayed late. And Jake would clean the floors, empty the trash, and wipe down the windows. There was something lonely about it. The fluorescent lights flickered above him as he pushed his mop across the polished floors, and the silence of the empty office spaces seemed to echo in his mind. Sometimes, he would sit for a moment in the break room, looking out of the window at the city lights and wondering what his life could have been if things had turned out differently. It wasn't always like this. Jake had once been full of ambition, full of dreams. He had been the kind of person who believed that if you worked hard enough, you could make anything happen. He had dreams of starting his own business, of being successful, of creating a life for himself and his family that would be filled with comfort and security. But dreams were fragile things, easily broken by the weight of reality. When his wife left, everything changed. It wasn't just the absence of another person in the house. It was the crushing weight of responsibility that Jake had to bear on his own. He had to pick up the pieces of their broken family and try to rebuild a life that was falling apart. Lucas was just a baby when his mother walked away, and Jake made a silent promise to his son that he would always be there for him, no matter what. He would be both father and mother, protector and provider. He would carry the burden without complaint, even if it meant sacrificing his own dreams. And so, Jake continued to work. He woke up early every day and went to bed late at night, never giving himself a break. There were no vacations, no time off. His life revolved around making sure that Lucas had everything he needed, but the longer Jake worked, the more he realized that his own dreams were slipping further away. The weight of his responsibilities was taking a toll on him, physically and emotionally. He felt like he was losing himself in the process. Tonight, like every other night, Jake was at the office building, mopping the floors. His mind wasn't focused on the work in front of him, but on the life he had built and the life he had left behind. It was hard not to feel defeated. He had tried so hard to make something of himself, but it seemed like the harder he worked, the further away his dreams became. He watched as people in the building went about their work, their lives. And he couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to have that kind of freedom, to not have to worry about where the next paycheck was coming from or how he was going to make ends meet. He had tried everything he could to change his situation. He had applied for better jobs, hoping for a break, but nothing ever seemed to work out. The rejection letters piled up in his inbox, and the constant feeling of failure gnawed at him. He had tried to start small side businesses, selling things online, offering freelance services, but they never took off. No matter how hard he tried, it always felt like he was stuck in the same place, unable to break free from the cycle of financial struggle. But tonight was different. As Jake pushed his mop across the floor, he noticed something strange. There was a flickering light in the corner of the hallway, one of the fluorescent bulbs that had been on the verge of burning out for weeks. It was a minor thing, something that most people wouldn't even notice. But Jake had always been the type to pay attention to details. He had learned early on that it was the little things that made the biggest difference. For some reason, that flickering light bothered him. It was a symbol of everything he had been trying to fix in his own life. It was a small problem, but one that no one had bothered to address. The people in the building, the ones who worked in the corporate offices and earned six-figure salaries, didn't notice. It wasn't their job to care about the flickering light in the hallway. It was just another small issue in a world full of bigger problems. Jake knew he wasn't supposed to fix it. He was just the janitor, the guy who cleaned up after everyone else. It wasn't his job to repair lights or fix things that were broken. But for some reason, that thought didn't stop him. He stood there, looking at the light, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of something inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't want to just clean the floors and empty the trash. He wanted to fix things, to make a difference, even if it was in the smallest of ways. He glanced around the empty hallway, making sure no one was watching. He knew it was a small act, but it was the kind of thing that mattered to him. Maybe it was because, in that moment, he felt like he could do something. He could fix something that no one else cared about. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. With a deep breath, Jake walked over to the utility closet and grabbed a ladder and some tools. He knew it wasn't supposed to be his responsibility, but something inside him pushed him to do it anyway. He climbed up the ladder and began to work on the light, carefully adjusting the bulb and wiring it properly. It wasn't an easy task, but Jake had learned how to fix things over the years, mostly out of necessity. He wasn't an expert, but he could get the job done. As he worked, Jake couldn't help but think about the bigger picture. Was this how it would always be? Would he always be the guy who fixed the small problems while the world around him continued to ignore them? It felt like he was stuck in a never-ending cycle of fixing things that no one else cared about, while his own life continued to crumble around him. But as the light flickered back to life, Jake felt a small sense of pride. It was just a light, but it was his light. It was something he had fixed, something he had taken ownership of. And in that moment it felt like the weight of the world was a little bit lighter. Maybe it wasn't much, but it was something. It was proof that he could still make a difference, even in the smallest of ways. Jake stepped down from the ladder, looking at the light that now shone brightly in the hallway. He smiled to himself, feeling a sense of accomplishment that he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't just a janitor, he was someone who could fix things, someone who could make a difference. Maybe, just maybe, his life was about to change. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt hopeful. He had done something that mattered, even if it was small. He had taken the initiative to solve a problem that no one else cared about, and for once, he didn't feel invisible. He had proven to himself that he wasn't just a cog in the machine, he was someone who could make things happen. As he finished up his work for the night and prepared to leave, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him. Maybe this was the first step toward a bigger change. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to get out of this endless cycle of struggle and build a life that was more than just survival. Maybe, for the first time in a long time, he could start dreaming again. As he locked the door behind him and walked out into the cool night air, Jake felt a sense of possibility. He wasn't sure where it would lead, but he knew that something had changed. The small act of fixing a light had given him back a sense of purpose, a spark of hope that he hadn't felt in years. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt like his life was worth something again. Jake was still buzzing from the small victory of fixing the light. He walked out into the cool night air with his heart a little lighter than it had been when he entered the office building hours before. It was funny how something as simple as repairing a broken light could make such a difference in his outlook. For once, he felt like he had done something that mattered. He wasn't just a background figure in the machinery of life, he had actively changed something. It wasn't much, but it was his. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt like he had a small piece of control over his life. The streetlights flickered as he walked down the sidewalk toward his car. The world around him seemed quieter now, more subdued. His tired eyes tried to focus on the journey home, but his mind kept drifting back to that moment in the hallway. Standing on that ladder, fixing something that no one else had bothered with. It wasn't even a big thing, but it felt monumental. He thought about how his life had become a string of small, unnoticed actions caring for Lucas, cleaning office floors, fixing lights. But maybe, just maybe, that was how things changed. Maybe the small, unnoticed things were the foundation of the bigger changes to come. His thoughts were interrupted as his phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled to take it out, half expecting a message from Lucas, who might have stayed up a little later than usual. Instead, it was an email, a reminder from the job application he'd sent weeks ago. Jake sighed deeply, staring at the subject line. Application status update. He had applied for a new position at a local company, hoping that this job would be the break he needed. He had gone through the interview process, only to be left hanging in uncertainty for weeks. Now this reminder felt like another slap in the face, another reminder that he wasn't good enough for something better. He didn't even want to open it, but curiosity got the better of him. His thumb hovered over the screen as he clicked open the email, his heart sinking before he even read a word. The rejection was impersonal, cold. It didn't even give him a reason why he hadn't been selected. He had hoped and needed this to work out. But instead, here he was again, facing another closed door. He tossed the phone back into his pocket and walked faster, trying to shake the feeling of defeat. By the time he got home, it was well past midnight. The lights were off in the house, save for a faint glow from the nightlight in Lucas's room. Jake stepped inside quietly, not wanting to wake his son. His shoes made a soft thud on the wooden floor as he made his way to the kitchen. He stood there for a moment, staring into the empty refrigerator. There wasn't much in there, a few cans of soup, some leftover rice, and a carton of milk that was about to expire. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, a constant reminder of how little they had. Jake had always prided himself on being resourceful, on making do with whatever he had. But tonight, as he stood there, staring at the sparse contents of the fridge, he felt something shift inside him, a deep, aching frustration. How had he gotten here? How had his life become a series of small failures and unmet expectations? Every day, he worked tirelessly to make sure Lucas had what he needed, but what did he have for himself? What was left for Jake? He didn't know how long he stood there, but eventually, he grabbed a can of soup and heated it up on the stove. He sat down at the kitchen table, the warmth of the soup offering some comfort as he stared out the window at the dark street. The world outside seemed so far away, like he was disconnected from everything. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up this charade, working two jobs, putting on a smile for Lucas, pretending that everything was fine. The truth was, he was exhausted, and yet, he couldn't stop. He had no choice. Jake had never been one to wallow in self-pity. He had always believed that hard work would pay off in the end. But lately, it felt like he was stuck in a cycle, running in place, never getting any closer to the life he dreamed of. He pushed the thought aside and focused on the small things: Lucas's smile, the moments when they laughed together, the quiet evenings they shared. Those moments were what kept him going. Without them, he would have nothing. The next morning, Jake woke up to the sound of Lucas's voice, calling out from the hallway. He blinked, trying to shake off the weight of the long night, and forced a smile. "Good morning, buddy," he said, rubbing his eyes as he made his way to the kitchen. Lucas was already sitting at the table, his backpack slung over the back of the chair, a bowl of cereal in front of him. His eyes lit up when he saw Jake. "Morning, Dad. Guess what? I got an A on my math test," Lucas said, his voice filled with pride. Jake's heart swelled with warmth. He leaned down and ruffled Lucas's hair. "That's amazing, kiddo. I'm so proud of you." Lucas grinned. "I've worked hard for it. Just like you work hard, right?" Jake nodded, his throat tightening. "Yeah, just like me." It wasn't much, but hearing those words from Lucas made everything feel a little bit easier. If Lucas could push through his struggles and succeed, then Jake could keep going too. His son's resilience was a constant reminder of why he couldn't give up. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. The bills could pile up, the rejection letters could keep coming, but as long as Lucas was by his side, Jake knew he had a reason to keep fighting. As the day went on, Jake tried to focus on his tasks at work, but his mind kept drifting back to the email from the night before. The rejection stung, but it also reminded him of something he had long forgotten. His worth was not determined by the jobs he applied for or the positions he held. He was more than his circumstances. The light he had fixed the night before proved that, even if no one else noticed, he had made a difference. And that small act of fixing the light had unlocked something inside him, a spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, he could change his life if he kept at it. That evening, as Jake drove back to the office building for his cleaning shift, he found himself looking at the familiar skyline with a new perspective. The tall glass buildings seemed to reflect his thoughts, gleaming, pristine, and yet, full of hidden cracks. It was easy to look at the polished surfaces and forget the work that went into maintaining them, the effort it took to make everything look perfect. But Jake knew better. He had seen the behind-the-scenes mess, the dirty floors, the dust in the corners, and the flickering lights. He understood that everything, no matter how flawless it appeared, had its imperfections. As he walked into the building, his footsteps echoed down the empty hallway. The silence felt different now. Instead of the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him, he felt a sense of purpose. His mind wandered to the possibilities. What if he could do more than just clean these offices? What if he could be part of something bigger? The thought made his chest tighten. He didn't know where it would lead, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him. Jake grabbed his mop and bucket, ready to get to work. But tonight, it wasn't just about mopping the floors. It was about fixing things, about taking ownership of the small moments that could lead to bigger changes. As he made his way through the building, he couldn't help but feel like he was on the brink of something. Maybe this job, this office building, was where his journey would begin, not as the janitor, but as someone who made things happen. The flickering light from the night before caught his eye again. This time, it wasn't a problem. It was an opportunity. He walked toward the corner of the hallway, grabbed the ladder once more, and started to work. This time, it wasn't about fixing a light. It was about fixing his own life, one small step at a time. As Jake worked, he felt something inside him click. It wasn't just the act of fixing the light. It was the realization that he could make a difference, even if no one else noticed. Maybe it wasn't the big break he had hoped for, but it was a start, and that was enough. As the light flickered back to life, Jake took a step back and admired his work. The hallway seemed a little brighter, a little more alive. He smiled to himself, knowing that this small task had given him back something he hadn't realized. He had lost his confidence. He finished his shift with a renewed sense of purpose. As he walked out of the building, the cool night air felt fresher, the city lights seemed brighter, and Jake felt a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. His journey wasn't over yet, but for the first time, he felt like he was headed in the right direction. Jake woke up the next morning to the sound of his alarm blaring in his ear. The early morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft rays across the room. He squinted at the clock. 6 a.m. Lucas would be up soon, eager to get ready for school, and Jake had no time to waste. The long day ahead would be filled with work, responsibilities, and the unyielding feeling of being stuck in an endless cycle. But today was different. Something inside him shifted. Maybe it was the light he fixed the night before, or maybe it was the realization that he could take control of his life, even in small ways. Whatever it was, Jake knew he couldn't let it go. Today had to be different. He needed to make a change. He dragged himself out of bed and quickly got dressed, not bothering to look at the mirror. It wasn't vanity that worried him, it was the exhaustion that showed on his face, the dark circles under his eyes. But he pushed it aside. There was no time to think about that now. Lucas would be awake soon, and Jake had to make sure his son started the day with a smile. As Jake walked into the kitchen, Lucas was already sitting at the table, his backpack slung over his shoulder. His eyes lit up as soon as he saw Jake, his face bright and full of energy, as only a child's could be. "Dad, I made a new drawing for you. I think it's the best one yet." Jake smiled despite the weight on his chest. He walked over to the table and sat down next to Lucas, taking the crumpled piece of paper from his son's hands. It was a drawing of them together, Jake and Lucas holding hands under a big tree. The colors were bright, the lines messy but filled with love. Jake's heart swelled as he looked at it. It was simple, yes, but to Jake, it was everything. It was a reminder of why he kept going every day, even when things seemed impossible. "This is amazing, buddy. I love it," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. Lucas beamed. "I'm glad you like it. I made it just for you. You're the best dad." Jake ruffled his son's hair, his throat tightening. It was moments like this that reminded him why he couldn't give up. No matter how hard things got, he had to keep fighting for Lucas, for himself, for a future they both deserved. The weight of his own dreams felt heavy, but the weight of responsibility was even heavier. Jake's dreams had been put on hold long ago, replaced by the constant need to provide for his family. But seeing Lucas's innocent smile made him think that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for those dreams. The morning passed in a blur of routine. Jake dropped Lucas off at school and made his way to his 9-to-5 job. The one that paid the bills but didn't ignite any passion. It was the kind of job that didn't require much thought paperwork, emails, phone calls, but it kept food on the table. The only problem was that Jake felt like he was wasting away in it. The years spent in a cubicle felt like years lost. Hours spent in meetings that didn't matter, surrounded by colleagues who barely knew his name. He had once dreamed of doing something more, but those dreams had been buried long ago, covered by the weight of responsibility. But today, as Jake sat at his desk, something inside him stirred. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for more than this. The small victory of fixing the light had ignited a fire in him, one he couldn't ignore. He found himself staring at the computer screen, his mind racing with possibilities. Could he finally make a change? Was it too late to pursue something bigger, to build a future that wasn't just about surviving but about living? His thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of his phone. It was a notification from his email. Jake hesitated before opening it, half expecting it to be another rejection. But when he saw the subject line, his heart skipped a beat. Job offer, marketing coordinator. He opened the email quickly, his fingers trembling with anticipation. It was the company he had applied 2 weeks ago, the one he had almost given up on, the one he thought had passed him by. And now, here it was. An offer, an opportunity to change everything. His eyes scanned the details. A better salary, a chance to work in a field he was passionate about, and a team that seemed to value growth and creativity. It wasn't just a job offer, it was the chance he had been waiting for. The opportunity to take a step into the life he had dreamed of. Jake's heart raced as he sat there in stunned silence. He had worked so hard for this, putting in countless hours at the office, at the cleaning job, sacrificing everything to make sure Lucas had a future. And now, it seemed like everything was about to change. But there was a catch, a big one. The job required him to move across the city, to take on a longer commute, and to sacrifice even more time with Lucas. It was a step forward, but it came at a price. He thought about Lucas, the long hours they had already spent apart, the days when he barely had time to tuck his son into bed. Jake knew that this new job would take him away even more, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. It was the chance to make a real difference in their lives, to build something for their future. He stared at the email, torn between the excitement of the offer and the fear of what it would mean for their relationship. His phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from Lucas. "Dad, I miss you already. Can we go to the park after school?" Jake's heart ached. He had missed so much of Lucas's life already, and the thought of missing even more made him question everything. And the job offer could be the key to their future, but at what cost? Could he balance the demands of the new job with his responsibilities as a father? Could he still be the dad Lucas needed while chasing his own dreams? The questions circled in his mind as the hours passed, and by the time the workday ended, Jake was no closer to an answer. He had to make a decision, and fast. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the weight of this choice wasn't just on him, it was on both of them. The life they had now, the one that felt like a constant struggle, could be different, it could be better, but it would require sacrifices, and Jake wasn't sure if he was ready for that. When he got home that evening, Lucas was waiting for him in the living room, a big smile on his face. "Dad, I can't wait to tell you all about my day, and I finished a new drawing too. I think it's even better than the last one." Jake smiled and hugged his son tightly. For a moment, everything felt right. Everything felt simple again. But the weight of the decision loomed over him. How could he explain it to Lucas? How could he explain that everything he was doing, everything he had been working for, was for their future? He didn't want to disappoint his son. He didn't want Lucas to feel like he wasn't there, like it didn't matter. The evening passed in a blur of laughter and conversation as Jake tried to push aside the fear that gnawed at him. But by the time Lucas went to bed, Jake was left alone with his thoughts. He sat at the kitchen table, the offer still open on his laptop. His mind raced as he weighed the pros and cons. Was this really the right move for them? Was it the right move for him? As he sat there, staring at the screen, he felt something inside him shift again. He had been living in fear for so long, afraid to take risks, afraid to change. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop playing it safe. It was time to stop thinking about what might go wrong and start thinking about what could go right. The opportunity in front of him was exactly what he needed to take the next step toward the life he had always dreamed of. Jake stood up, a sense of clarity washing over him. He knew what he had to do. He picked up his phone and called the company to accept the job offer. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges ahead. But Jake was no longer afraid of the future. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was finally taking control. The next day, Jake told Lucas about the job offer. He explained that things were going to change, that he would have to work longer hours, that he might not always be there in the way he had been. But Jake also promised that he was doing it for them to give them a better future. Lucas listened intently, nodding, his face thoughtful but understanding. "I get it, Dad," Lucas said. "I'm proud of you." Jake smiled, feeling the weight of the world lift off his shoulders. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like it was full of possibilities. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Jake knew one thing for sure. He was ready to walk it, no matter what. Jake sat at his desk the next morning, a cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand, staring at the email confirmation of his new job offer. His heart pounded in his chest. He had made the decision to accept the position, and though it felt like the right choice, doubts still lingered in his mind. What if he was making the wrong choice? What if he ended up regretting it? Could he truly balance his career with his responsibilities as a father? It felt like stepping into an unknown world, a leap of faith that could either elevate him or shatter the fragile routine he had spent so long building with Lucas. It wasn't just the job that weighed on him, but the decision to uproot their lives. The office, though quiet and monotonous, was comfortable. Jake had grown used to the routine, to the people he worked with, and to the rhythms of their home. But now everything was about to change. The commute would be longer, the hours more demanding, and Jake would have to leave Lucas at home more often. Even though he was doing this for their future, the fear of losing his connection with his son clawed at him. Lucas depended on him, and Jake's biggest fear was that he would lose sight of what truly mattered: his relationship with his son. Jake had always put Lucas first, always tried to be there for him, no matter how tired or overworked he was. But with the new job, he would have to make sacrifices. Would he still be able to maintain the balance between his work and being a present father? Could he show up for Lucas in the way he needed him, when he was being pulled in 100 different directions? His mind swirled with conflicting emotions, and he felt a knot form in his stomach as the weight of his decisions settled deeper inside him. The day passed in a haze of uncertainty at work. Jake went through the motions, answering emails and processing documents, but his mind was elsewhere. His thoughts kept drifting to Lucas. What would it be like when he had to leave him at home more often? What would Lucas think when he was no longer around to walk him to school or tuck him in at night? Would the little moments they shared, the conversations at the dinner table, the games they played together feel like distant memories in a few months? Jake couldn't shake the sense of guilt that gnawed at him. He had promised Lucas that he would always be there, but now it felt like he was breaking that promise, even though he was doing it for the best of reasons. That evening, when Jake picked Lucas up from school, the car ride home was quieter than usual. Lucas was unusually reserved, his face buried in his phone as he scrolled through the screen. Jake stole a glance at him, wondering if his son could sense the tension in the air. Lucas had always been perceptive, always able to pick up on Jake's moods, even when he tried to hide them. Maybe it was the job change that was on Lucas's mind, too. He had been so excited about the idea of Jake working in a new field, but now, the uncertainty in the air was palpable. As they pulled into the driveway, Lucas sighed deeply and put his phone down. "Dad, can we talk?" Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure how to respond. He parked the car and turned to face Lucas, trying to read the expression on his son's face. "Of course, buddy, what's on your mind?" Lucas hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "I know you've got this new job, and I'm happy for you, but I'm going to miss you. I miss you when you're gone already, but now, with this new job, you're going to be gone even more, right?" Jake felt a lump form in his throat. Lucas's words cut through him like a knife, and for the first time, Jake realized how much his son had been carrying in silence. Lucas was young, but he had already understood the sacrifices his father had made for him. Jake had never wanted his son to feel abandoned, but the reality was that his work had already taken him away from Lucas in so many small ways. The thought of doing it more, of spending even less time together, made Jake's heart ache. "I'm sorry, Lucas," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know it's going to be hard, but I'm doing this for us. I'm doing it so that we can have a better future. I want you to have everything you need, and I want us to be comfortable. I want you to know that I love you, and no matter what, I'll always be here for you. I'm not going anywhere." Lucas's eyes welled up with tears, and Jake's heart broke. "But you are going somewhere, Dan. You'll be gone longer, and I don't want you to forget about me. I don't want to be alone." Jake pulled his son into a tight hug, his chest heavy with the weight of his son's words. He whispered in Lucas's ear, "You're never alone, Lucas. You're my world. And I promise you, no matter how busy I get, I will always make time for you. Always." They sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. Jake could feel the years of his own sacrifices reflected in his son's words. He had worked so hard to build a better life for them, but now, the cost of that work felt like it was too high. Was he giving up too much? Would the sacrifices he was making now be worth it in the end? Later that night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Jake sat in the living room, deep in thought. He thought about everything he had sacrificed for his family, his time, his dreams, his own personal desires, and wondered if he had been too focused on making a better future that he had neglected to truly enjoy the present. The reality of his new job still loomed in front of him, and Jake knew that the next few months would be difficult. But he also knew that he had to give this new opportunity everything he had. He couldn't let fear or guilt hold him back. He had to take this step for both of them. The next few weeks were a blur of transition. Jake started his new job with excitement and apprehension in equal measure. He threw himself into his work, determined to prove himself and make the most of the opportunity that had come his way. The marketing team at the company was welcoming and eager to get him involved. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt like he was part of something bigger. His new role gave him a sense of purpose that he had been lacking for years. But as much as he enjoyed the challenge and the chance to prove his worth, there was always a part of him that missed the quiet moments with Lucas. As the days passed, Jake tried to find a balance between his new responsibilities and his life at home. He made sure to carve out time for Lucas whenever he could, whether it was playing video games, going for walks, or simply sitting together at the kitchen table, talking about their day. But even as he worked to keep their bond strong, Jake could feel the distance growing between them. It wasn't anything big, but the little moments were slipping away, moments that had once been so natural and easy. One evening, as Jake walked in the door after a long day at work, he found Lucas sitting on the couch, staring at the TV with an expression of indifference. Jake could tell that something was off. "Hey buddy," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "How was your day?" Lucas barely looked up. "It was fine." Jake sat down next to him, his heart sinking. He had expected some resistance, but this felt different. "Is everything okay?" Lucas sighed and turned to face him. "I miss you, Dad. You're always gone, and it feels like we're living different lives now. I don't know where you went, but you're not the same anymore." Jake felt like he had been punched in the gut. The words hit him harder than he had anticipated. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I know things have changed, and I hate that I'm not around as much. But I'm doing this for us. I promise I'm not going anywhere. You mean the world to me, and I'm just trying to make sure we have a better future." Lucas looked at him with tears in his eyes. "I just want my dad back." Jake pulled his son into his arms, his chest tight with emotion. "I'm here, Lucas. I'm always here for you. I'll do better. I promise." That night, Jake realized that the cost of progress was steep, but the reward was worth the effort. The job, the new opportunities, the hope for a better future was all meaningful, but it would mean nothing without the people who mattered most. His relationship with Lucas was the foundation of everything, and he couldn't afford to let it crumble. From that moment on, Jake made a conscious effort to keep the balance between his work and his life as a father. He adjusted his schedule, prioritized time with Lucas, and worked hard to show his son that no matter how busy he was, he would never stop being there for him. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The moments they shared, the laughter, the talks, the walks, they were what truly mattered. And Jake knew, deep down, that no matter where life took him, his bond with Lucas would be the one thing that would never change.